Hi, my name is Kevin and I collect old irons. We now have 50 videos behind us. Each explores some aspect of the subject of old irons. In today's video, we seek to distill the larger diversity of old irons, particularly American laundry irons, in 25 categories. Any summarization of such a complicated subject as old irons is not easily done. After all, what are the essential categories? And here, I got to be upfront. I've had to put considerable thought in the mixing and matching of the diversity of irons to get them all crammed into 25 categories. And I know for a fact that other collectors will see this somewhat differently. To begin, there has to be some limits. The 25 categories listed here are for devices used to press fabric that would be worn by American people, which means that we're excluding some categories, such as irons used to press the fabric on billiard tables or photographic paper or the binding of books. We also don't have a category for toys, since I view the toys to simply be miniature representations of the irons in these categories. There are decisions to be made. Chinese pan irons and Scandinavian mangle boards were certainly brought over to this country or made by first-generation immigrants, but are not more widely used by the American people, and so are here excluded. Whereas the golfers, for example, while being generally seen as European, were used at some level and by some numbers of different people here in the United States. While I include as categories in this talk specialty irons used for men's and women's hats, I do not include irons used for men's ties or for gloves. With all that said, let us march very quickly through 25 essential categories of American laundry irons. For some of these categories, we've already done a video, maybe several videos, and for others, we'll do videos in the future. We will start with the Flatiron, which surely is the category of iron that has the longest experience in American history. I'm sure that these things came across to here on the Mayflower. They have been made by foundries at least into the 1980s and are probably made somewhere or another here in the United States to this day. Great diversity. This particular one has a nice shield. Our second category is the slug irons. These include an internal slug, which is heated and placed within the iron, a relatively minor group in American experience, but they were used from colonial times to the early 1900s. Category 3 is the detachable handle irons, and we have 5 videos on various groups of these, and here is another one. Category 4 are the polishing irons. These have rounded bottoms used for the sheen that you see in the collars and sleeves, for example. Another category of irons mostly heated on the stove are the sleeve irons, long and narrow to go into sleeves. This particular one has a detachable handle and thus is a mixed category iron, sleeves and detachable handles. Rotary irons, also called rotating irons, are a relatively minor group, but our video on the subject has received a very substantial number of views. These have a rotating body and use a wide diversity of different heat sources. This particular one probably used crude oil. Tailor irons are a favorite category of mine. These are irons that were used by those who did their ironing as a profession, and I have here included a sad iron heater that would have heated a tailor iron. Our next category is the seam irons, which are designed to be particularly heavy with a narrow pressing surface. These could be seen as a subset of tailor irons. This work was largely done by tailors, And there are some of these irons that take the tailor shapes, they're just very much more narrow. But I've decided this might be a category in its own right. There are quite a number of specialized irons that fit in this category. The next category is a group for which I do not have an example in my own collection to show. This is the, what I call the machine mangles, or the cranked mangles, that are used for pressing linen, and the pieces of cloth are being assembled into an outfit. And I have here a photograph from Teo, a friend of ours, collector in Canada, and we will later on visit Teo and do an extended video on this subject. We do have another category of large irons. I call these the industrial steam irons. Steam would have come in here to heat these irons, and these irons would be used in an industrial laundry operation. They oftentimes have some device that would allow these things to be pulled in place or pulled along on a conveyor belt. Here is another fairly minor category of irons that we'll be doing a video on pretty soon, and for want of a better name, I have coined the name rear-handled irons. This one is electric, again the iron with the handle to the rear. This one's a hat iron, again specialized piece with a handle to the rear, and there is quite considerable diversity in these, as we'll see at a later time. Up next is a particularly favorite group of mine, which is the specialized devices used for the making and refurbishment of hats. Great diversity. This particular one would have gone around the brims and has some nice company markings. The art of millinery had its own specialized diversity of irons for women's hats, and many of these are standing. I'm not using standing as a category name here. Instead, I'm calling these the ball irons. They're ball, egg, mushroom shaped devices, perhaps standing, perhaps used by the hand. There is another category, and I think this is a category in its own right, that are irons that are, well, Kate calls them the anti-irons. They're not designed to remove wrinkles from the fabric, but rather to impress a design. These can be called embossing irons, but the most notable group within these are the flower irons used for women's hats in the 1920s and thereabouts. And then there are the gophers. This is, for the most part, a European style, but did find general use, I think, in the United States. These have a slug inserted in this long gopher here. This particular one is something I picked up recently. It's brass here, but this is also painted brass. And another minor category that might make up a few specimens in a fairly large collection are what I call the scissors irons. These come in many forms and functions. This one is probably used for the corners of collars, but they are also fluting and other varieties as well. There has been much thought and discussion in this household about whether the fluting irons should be one category or two. They're the same general application, but the types are quite different. We are talking here about the hand fluters and the machine fluters. I am placing these into two separate categories. For one thing, in the American experience at least, there is no single manufacturer that made both of these general categories. The hand fluter, of course, uses the hand. It has two pieces. This one also has the additional base. You have the handle, and then you have the bottom plate, and the handle might be a roller or other kinds of devices as well. And I will remind you all that we have a video about how these were used. And then the machine fluters. The machine fluters have two rollers and they have a crank. It's a much different kind of device. There are slugs that go into these as well. And again, are these two legitimate categories, or should they be placed just in the fluting category? That's one of the things that we could argue about. Our 20th category is those irons expressly designed for travel. that is to say, very small in size, compact design, reduced weight, and there are many different types within this category. This particular one is an iron that would be placed on the existing natural gas outlet in a motel room and using that for heat. And now, 5 categories that relate to the source of heat, oftentimes the heat being internal to the irons. And we will start with the coal irons. This one is German, but I'm using here because it is the mascot for the Old Iron Inn B&B. If you open it up, you would place your coal or perhaps charcoal from the stove into this and then use that to iron. The late 1800s and the first half of the 1900s were a time when liquid fuels saw much use in irons. By liquid fuels we mean gasoline, oil, all kinds of liquid mixtures, including water, hot water that could be used to heat the iron. And this particular one has the gas tank beneath the handle. In the early 1900s, natural gas became very popular for irons, and these oftentimes have tops that can be removed so that you can do some general cleaning within. There is a significantly less common group of fossil fuel heated irons, and these are irons that have an external heat source. This one looks like a flat iron, could look like a slug iron, but there is no door here, there's an opening in the back. And this iron would be used to, in the context of a natural gas nozzle or some other device, would be used to heat the iron for use. The category, of course, that you find at Walmart is the electric irons. This is a huge category. The example here is from 1910, very similar to the irons of that period, but there is an electrical plug. This particular one is not burned handle. As a matter of the original black handle has been worn off through use, and this one probably saw a lot of use, and includes what some people would call a trivet, but in application to irons we would call this the stand. There has been much thought into what would be the final category in this presentation, and the ultimate decision was the combination irons. The combination irons are irons designed at the outset to fill multiple applications, a combination of functions, so to say. This particular iron is a slug iron. I won't take the handle off here because it takes some jiggering to do so. And you could then add on the little extra piece here, and you could use it for a fluting iron. And this is a group that the more experienced collectors seek out. There's many different types of these. But let me impress upon you that the combination irons are irons designed for multiple applications, and there's something else as well, and that is the mixed category irons. Irons that have only a single purpose, but which fill various categories. Like, for example, we have here a tailored iron with detachable handle. Here's a hat iron powered by natural gas. Here is a, let's see if I can get this to work right. Yep, here is a rotating fluting iron. And there are many variations on this. There's so many different assortments and configurations, and that's what makes iron collecting so popular amongst those that are interested in this topic, and so hard to adequately summarize. In addition to the 25 essential sad iron topics that we've talked about here in the American experience, there are other irons in the American and in foreign experiences as well, and a wide variety of support topics, which can include things we've talked about already, which are the sad iron heaters, the stands, the trade cards, the toys, and there's other kinds of topics as well, the water sprinklers, for example, sad iron art, other ephemera, and maybe there's somebody out there who has a collection of ironing boards that they might be willing to share with us. Thanks so much for joining me. It's my great pleasure to share this interest with people also interested in history and collecting subjects. YouTube loves to have thumbs up and comments, and we've got plenty more to talk about. See you next time.